In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a simple dashboard using data that's stored in Azure that has been put there by the Brother mobile deploy app. What we can see here is the different printers that we've got connected and talking to Azure, and we can choose the different options here. We can have a look at battery life information, and we can see that as we click through these different things, each one of these charts dynamically updates. So how do we make this kind of dashboard using Excel and Microsoft Azure? Let's have a look. First of all, what you can see here is I've got a blank Excel sheet which I've renamed as dashboard, and I've just put some text and a blue border here. There's no formulas, there's nothing in here at all. I've just done this to save a little bit of time. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to create Excel to the Azure data source. So to do that, we click on Data, and then we click on Get Data from Azure, and then from the Azure Table Storage option. When we click that, we will be asked for an Azure Table Storage name. So I'm just going to paste a value in that I've already provided, and then I'm going to click on OK. Now normally what would also happen is you'd be asked to enter a key to access the data. Because I've already done that in this sheet, then it's not asking me, but if it's the first time you're doing it, you will be asked to provide that information, which you can get from the Azure portal. I'm now going to choose the table that I want to get the data of, and you can see that there's a brief summary of it here just to make sure I've got the right information. Now normally, of course, you'd have a more descriptive name for your table. It's best practice to have better table names than this, but for this particular demo, this is okay. So we click the table name, and then I'm going to click on Transform Data. The Power Query editor now loads, and this is my opportunity now to kind of have a look at the data and change things. So the first thing I need to do is I need to click on this Content option, and then I'm going to tell it to get all the different information from the Azure table. So click on OK, and we can now see we've got the battery life, the firmware version, etc. What I'm going to do at this stage is I'm just going to clean up some of this data. So first of all, for partition key, we already have the model name information in here. You can see we've got it in this column. And we've also got serial number as well here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two columns because we don't need them. So highlight them both and just remove columns. They're gone now. What I'm now going to do is I'm just going to rename the column headers to give them a better name. So I'm just going to call this one battery life, and then I will rename the other columns in the same way. And I'm going to remove this update date because I don't care about this information. So click it and remove that column. Now I've cleaned up the column names and deleted a few columns. I'm going to click on File, and then I'm going to click on Close and Load To. And then what I'm going to say is add this data to the data model and only create a connection. So in other words, I'm making the connection to Azure, but I'm not going to display the information in the sheet just yet. So click on OK. And that's the next step completed. We've now got that data into Excel. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some data based around model name. So I'm going to create a new tab, and then I'm going to rename it to model name. Then I'm going to click on Insert, and I'm going to go for Pivot Charts, and I'm going to make sure that I've got this option set here, use this workbook's data model, and I've also got the existing worksheet option set. So what that's going to do is tell Excel to grab the data from the data model, which ultimately will be the data from Azure, and then store the output into this particular worksheet. So I'll click on OK, and then I can see the table information that I've got access to. What I'm interested in is the model name, so I'll just drag that over. We've now got a very simple chart. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this chart type. So change chart type, and then click on this donut option here. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to have the data labels enabled because I need to see how many machines I've got. And then for this count of model name information, I'm going to remove that and also the one that was there as well. And then what I'll do is I'll drag that over there just to keep everything on the left-hand side. So that's the first bit of data that I've got for my dashboard. So what I'm going to do is copy that data, and then I'm going to paste it into the dashboard. And at this stage, I don't really care too much about the look of it, so I'm just going to place it there. The next thing I'm interested in doing is setting up some information to do with firmware. So I'm going to create a new tab again, and I'm going to rename this one to firmware, and I'm just drag that across over there. So as before, click on Insert, and this time I'm going to insert a pivot chart and a pivot table. And again, I'm going to make sure I've got these two options set here. So again, all data that I create will be in this particular worksheet. Click on OK, and again, I can see the Azure table. So what I'm interested in now is firmware version, and I'll put the values in here. However, what I can now see is I can see that for each version of firmware that's available, how many machines, how many printers actually have that version of firmware. And I can see in this particular instance, 2 printers have got that version of firmware. That's because what I'm seeing is a count of the total versions of firmware. However, I don't want to do that. I want to see a distinct count. How many unique values of firmware have I got? So if I change this to distinct count and click on OK, then what I can see now is that these are the distinct or unique versions of firmware, which is what I want to see. So again, I'm going to remove those because I don't really need it. And in this case, I'm going to change the title, and I'll spell it correctly. So now I've got a title called firmware versions, and again I'm just going to drag it over there. So again, like before, I'm going to copy it across to the dashboard, and again I'm not really bothered at this stage about making things look nice. I'm just getting the data into the dashboard. So that's the firmware information table sorted. The next thing we need to do is create something based around battery information. So what I'm going to do for this one, again, I'm going to create a new tab, and we'll rename this to battery information, and as before, insert pivot chart and use worksheets data model, use existing worksheet. Click on OK, and then table, and then battery information, and then battery life. That's OK, so let's remove these, and let's change this to battery status, and let's drag that across. And again, we don't need this information, so we'll turn that off. And that's our battery information sorted. What we will do though now is copy that over and put it into the dashboard like we have done before. Before we do anything else, it's time to start making this dashboard a little bit interactive. All we can do at the moment is just see the total of everything. We can't interact with it to see what's happening with all the RJ2140s, for example. So to give the interaction, we're going to start creating some slicers. So what we'll do is we'll go to the battery information tab, and then we'll click on Insert and Slicer, and then we get this screen here. So click on battery life, and then we see that slicer appear here. We'll copy it and paste it into the dashboard. Again, at this stage, we're going to not care too much about what things look like, but we do know that we're going to put these on the left-hand side. So just make a little bit of room here to create that. And what we now have is the ability to choose these different options. However, it's not changing these charts here. And that's because we need to click on the report connections option. And what we then do is tell it which connections to report to. And what that will then do is it will connect the options that we choose here with the different charts here. So in other words, if I want to see all the machines that have excellent battery life, I can click that, and then it will show me this 3230B is the only one with excellent battery information, which we can see that here. If we reset that now, and we want to have a look at machines that have good battery life, then we can see then now that there are two machines that have good battery information. So let's add some more slicers. We want to do the same now for model name. So we click on model name, click on insert, slicer, and we choose model name, click on OK, and we've got the model name slicer appear. Copy it and paste it into the dashboard, and we're going to put that over here like that. We'll just move that down a little bit. Now again, you can see that when I click these aren't changing, whereas they do on this one, and it's the same issue as before. We have to report the connections, and that will then link the slicer with the data. So now if we want to see different model name information, we can do that using this slicer. We'll do the same now for firmware. So we'll click on firmware tab, click on insert, click on slicer, and then we'll do firmware version. Click on OK. We've got the firmware information here. Again, copy and paste it into here. Just like before, nothing is happening on these two charts. What you'll see is that this one is changing because this slicer happens to be linked to this chart here, but these two are not changing because there's no link. So again, right click, report connections, and then enable these, and then it will be okay. So now whenever I change these things, everything is dynamically changing. And what we can do is move that over there for now, and we'll fix the layout later on. So we've added slicers, and we've used the report connections function to link the data with the slicers. We need to provide one more set of data for this before we can start to wrap this up. The next tab we're going to create is based around the number of unique machines that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this firmware tab here, and I'm just going to duplicate it. So I'm going to press the Control key on my keyboard, drag across, and that creates a duplicate version of this. What I will then do is rename it, and I will call this one Count of Printers. Okay. Now obviously this is to do with firmware because we've duplicated this tab. So I can delete this information, I don't need it. And for here, I can take these out because I'm not interested in those settings. Expand the table option, and then what I want to do is I want to grab model name, put that in there, And then I want firmware version, which I'll put in there too. Then I will also grab serial number, put that in there. And then for the values section, I want the serial number information. And then for the model name, then I want to put that in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this option here, because what it's showing me is the total number of serial numbers and models. But actually I want to get a unique value. So I'm going to change that to distinct count. Click on OK. And now I can see that I've got a distinct count of 4 because I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 printers, which is what I want. Now I've got that data, I'm going to put it onto the dashboard. So copy, and I'm going to paste it in here. And then what I'll have to do is I'll have to link it with the slicers because they're not connected to that data source, so it doesn't update. So to do that, again, report connections, and then we will do dashboard here. So now this is starting to change based on that. So again, do here, report connections, and then dashboard, oops, try again, report connections, make sure I click it this time, and then do the same here, report connections, and do the dashboard option there, click on OK. So now as I click these things, it affects everything that we have on the dashboard. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one more slicer. And to do that, I'm going to put it in the model name tab. I could put it in any tab, or I could even create a new tab if I wanted to. But I'm just going to reuse one that I've already created. So it's going to be in the model name tab. So click on model name, then insert, and then slicer. Sorry, I need to collect the data source. And then I'm going to choose the JSON version, which is here. So now I've got two slicers in this tab, that's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that out and I'm going to put it in here. And then what I'm going to start to do now is just make a little bit more room in here. So we'll give ourselves a little bit more space and put that over there like that. And again, I have to report the connections for this. So dashboard and dashboard, and that should be enough. So now it affects the different charts, which is correct. So I'm now ready to start to tidy this up and also put some data into these areas here, which I'll do now. So you can see here what I'm expecting to see is the total number of printers. So the total number of printers is over here. We can see here count of serial number, which effectively is the total number of printers because each printer has a unique serial number. And we've got the distinct count of model name, which tells us how many unique printers we have. So total number of printers, we click on equals here, and then click on that, and then press return. And we can see now that the total number of printers field is provided. Now we want to know unique printers. So again, equals, and we will choose the option here. So we've got 4 types of printer. We can see that here. We're going to put some firmware information in here. So press equals, firmware, and then return. And then we can see the number of unique firmware versions that we've got. So in essence now, that's the dashboard pretty much complete. There are a few other things that we can do to kind of line it up, make it look a little bit better on the page. Particularly this area here probably isn't best use of the screen. Right now it's not so bad because we've only got 4 printers. But as this list expands and expands, then this is going to look a little bit strange because the list is going to shoot down the page. So there may be a better way to display that kind of information. But basically, we can do everything we want now. If we want to have a look at devices that need battery replacements, we can click that tab and we can see that information. We can also have a look at firmware information. Maybe we've got machines that don't have the latest version of firmware, so we can quickly have a look at that using this slicer here. Equally, we can also now look at the JSON information as well to see what version of the JSON file was applied to these different printers, and that can help us to understand if we've got certain printers that maybe don't have the latest settings applied to them. So that's the basics of how you would create a dashboard using the data that we're storing in Azure. Thank you.